Well, here's somebody not doing what they're supposed to be doing probably, but why? Well, it could be this child has some special needs that need to be taken care of before he can get back to a more normal track. And that's what we're going to talk about here, is all the different kinds of special needs, exceptional learners in your classroom. So many different categories, so we're going to run through them here. And we'll start with ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, being diagnosed quite a bit these days. For better or for worse, I don't know, but it is the fact that this is coming up more and more. What does it mean, though, to have ADD or ADHD? It means distractibility. Here's a child who just really does not have the ability, for some reason, to focus and stay focused. Maybe another trait might be exhibited in terms of being very impulsive. This is a child who is not able to control their impulses, and they needs a lot of monitoring to keep them on track. It could be fidgetiness, just squirmy. Gotta move, gotta move, gotta move. At least some part of the body. Now, a child with ADHD or ADD might only be showing one or two of these symptoms. Might be all three. And it's very likely, as statistics show us, that this child probably has learning disabilities as well as the ADHD. So, how do we help them? Well, sometimes it works to give them, as we mentioned in another video, behavior contracts. If you can take care of what you need to do and monitor your behavior correctly for this amount of time, this often, you'll get a reward. That works. Behavior management like that works quite a bit well for some students with this difficulty. Whereas for others, it's going to mean they need to be on stimulant drugs. And you say, well, that must be a typo. No, it is not a typo. Before adolescence, children taking stimulants will have behaviors with the opposite effect of what you expect. Whereas that stimulant drug will make an adult rather hyper, it will actually calm down a child. Let's look at another category. Behavior disorders. What does that mean? Well, sometimes that's referred to as emotionally disturbed. And what does that mean? Well, it depends. For some students, their behavior disorder, their disturbance, is always directed toward other people. They're always trying to lash out, bother other people, blame other people. They might be angry, oppositional. No matter what you suggest, they want the opposite. Then again, you have others who are internalizing their disorder, and their behaviors are aimed toward self-destruction, self-destructive thoughts and actions. It's the same disorder, but it's a matter of who the target is. And these students will exhibit depression, withdrawal. They don't want to be around other people. They don't want to talk about it. And it's possible, maybe even likely, that these children will also have learning disabilities as well as their emotional disturbance. What will help them? Number one, high structure, very structured environment. Token economies, which I've mentioned before, where they know that they will be rewarded for certain things at a certain time, and they can trade in those tokens for very specific desirable things. That kind of structure in terms of scheduling and that type of structure in terms of behavior management really works well. But some students will need drugs that will help them calm down or alleviate some of their symptoms. I've mentioned learning disabilities already a couple of times. So what kinds of learning disabilities could happen? Well, a learning disability is associated with usually a specific subject area. A child might have a learning disability when it comes to reading or things about reading or math. And so they need help with just specific subject areas at specific times of day. Reading language is one category. Writing and communication might be a category, separate from reading and language. Math, whether it's math computation or problem solving in math, a child may have specific learning disabilities in that area. And, kind of the reverse of what I said a while ago, if a person has learning disabilities, it's likely they're going to have emotional problems. If they didn't start out with emotional problems, there's a good chance they will have them as they get into more and more frustrating schoolwork. So what do they benefit from? How do we help these students? Well, quite often, these are the students that are in pull-out programs, which means the student stays with his or her class, except when it comes time for, say, math. And at math, the student goes down the hall or across the courtyard to work with a teacher, a special ed teacher, just for that subject area, and then comes back to the classroom. Sometimes these students benefit from counseling, maybe just the school counselor. But bear in mind that pull-out can cause other problems, such as, well, think of this. A child who leaves the classroom once, maybe twice a day, and then is expected to come back. You're expecting them to go where they're supposed to go, come back when they're supposed to come back once or twice a day, and maybe they've already got some distractibility. So you see, this pull-out program idea could be great if you can keep it stable for the child and not find them wandering all over the school grounds because no one's really monitoring them in those in-between moments. Let's talk about another type of exceptional learner, the autism spectrum. Autism is a spectrum from very mild to very severe. And it's best characterized by a child's limited ability for social communication. It also might involve repetitive behaviors, rocking or knocking into things repeatedly, very unconscious kind of thing. And overall, an impairment in the ability to function on a day-to-day basis in the world with other people. Sometimes with autism, it's accompanied by savantism, meaning that here's a person who seems to not be able to function very well at all in the world, but when you sit this child down at a piano, they're playing at an adult level, maybe even a concert level. No explanation for that. And when we talk about the autism spectrum, we're talking about a range of levels of functionality and how responsive they can be to people and stimulus. Typically, the higher the IQ of an autistic person, the better outcome we can expect in an educational setting. But still, it's a lot of work to deal with autistic children and their needs for what it takes to gain their attention, gain their trust, and keep them learning and keep them from getting back into old patterns. They benefit from training, consistent training, and sometimes different kinds of therapies. Mental retardation, another kind of exceptional learner. It might be genetic, it might be caused by environmental factors that happen before birth or soon after birth. What are the schooling options of a child with an extremely low IQ? Well, experience has taught educators that the best way to figure out how to school a person with a low IQ is to look at how well does this person function, how much support does this person need, rather than saying, oh, this person has this number on the IQ scale, we know exactly what that person needs. No, you don't. So instead, you observe, you assess what that person is capable of, and that gives you clues about what kinds of education and training you can offer that person. So it might range in terms of education all the way from rather intermittent, limited support, let them actually be in the classroom with other children, that's a possibility. Then again, it may be so extensive, so pervasive in the way that their low intelligence affects their functionability that they need to be in a self-contained classroom. So there are assessments for that. And then there are other kinds of exceptionality. Speech and language communication disorders. Speech problems. For instance, a child who has difficulty expressing themselves. They're having trouble articulating in what we would consider a normal way, perhaps a lisp. Or they're having fluency problems such as stuttering. Or they have other kinds of vocal problems. Their voice is in an unusual pitch or highly nasal, and they need some help communicating. Or it could be that they're having trouble not expressing themselves, but understanding what other people are saying, understanding and comprehending what other people are trying to communicate to them. And along with this, very likely you might have social, academic problems with children who are already having trouble with language. They benefit from therapies, going to a speech teacher 2 or 3, 5 times a week, and in some cases surgeries. Vision and hearing impairment. Now that's defined like this. Vision impairment is a student who exhibits an inability to see what needs to be seen, no matter how much we correct the vision with lenses, with artificial lenses, put on glasses, contact lenses, and still they're having trouble seeing what needs to be seen. A hearing or auditory impairment can include anything from partial to complete deafness. And when we're talking about auditory impairment, if a child is young when this occurs and when it's diagnosed, you can probably expect that there may be some delayed language skills. And in fact, it may be the delayed language that gives parents or teachers the clue that there is an auditory impairment going on. And there may also be social and academic problems accompanying this too. Okay, now let's move on to a different kind of exceptionality. What we call gifted and talented students. They exhibit a high IQ plus. Okay, high IQ is not considered necessarily gifted and talented. Every school district seems to have a slightly different definition and way of defining and way of categorizing it. But usually you think in terms of high IQ plus high achievement. You're doing well in school. Or plus teachers can say, this child really persists no matter what and continues until finally successful. Well, that kind of persistence can be a real indication of being gifted and talented. Or maybe being very, very highly creative or artistic. Or showing leadership ability. And there are other possible traits that might go along with this too that teachers need to take note of and act on. For instance, gifted and talented children tend to be highly verbal, highly imaginative, and guess what? That sounds good in theory, but it can be mighty irritating if they haven't learned when and how to do that. Oftentimes they prefer to work alone. They don't really want to work on your group project. They'd rather be assigned something they can do by themselves. And they may have some social or emotional problems stemming from the fact that they do exhibit these differences from the rest of the students. So we've been talking about, well, what kind of interventions are there for these kinds of exceptional learners? Well, what kind of interventions do you have for gifted and talented students? Well, here's the thing. Everything I've talked about previously, there are mandates, there are laws in place saying these are the kinds of services you must offer children who exhibit these difficulties. But with gifted and talented, there is no law. In any state or district, there is no law that says you have to offer certain services to this kind of student. But schools do tend to do that. And they have to work out some kind of a program that gifted students can go to. And there are choices for educators. One is accelerated programs. Okay? Advanced placement courses, like in high school, for instance, that's accelerated vertical kinds of enrichment. In other words, you're so good at math, we're going to bump you up to 2 or 3 grade levels because you're capable of it. So we want to make sure that you're not getting bored in math class. That's vertical. We'll just send you up to higher levels. But that's not the only option. There's also enrichment, horizontal kinds of programs. We're not going to teach you more. We're not going to bump you up to higher levels. We're going to let you have enrichment experiences where you get to do special activities, special research on a topic that really interests you. Renzulli was an educator who came up with a model program for gifted and talented after all of his research. And to him, a really good gifted and talented program would include exploratory activities so students could find what they're good at, what they're interested in case they haven't been exposed to everything possible. It would have group activities for problem solving and to test out leadership skills. And it would have real-world projects built in so that students aren't living all the time in imagination and creativity, but they have to produce something. They have to work together to come up with a solution and make something happen that really is practical and workable, not just for themselves, but for other people too. To him, this was the ideal way to deal with gifted and talented students. And a lot of district and school programs are modeled on the Renzulli principles. So, there's your overview of exceptional learners. Exceptional in so many different ways. Exceptional because of how they think. Exceptional because of difficulties they have physiologically, cognitively, socially, emotionally. And you have to be prepared for any and all of this. So not only do you want to review this video, but you want to really dig into some supplementary readings and learn about all these different kinds of issues that you might find yourself dealing with in the classroom. And of course, check out review questions, and good luck.